All right, so once you agree on a deal with a brand, the last part is to create and sign a contract, and that can take a while. Now, before I go any further, my attorney would be very upset with me if I don't tell you that I am not an attorney, and none of this is legal advice. This is all is business advice, which is true. So let's talk about this because that's quite a process. So first and foremost, I strongly recommend that you have a template of a contract, of a brand agreement ready to go. That way you're starting on your turf. This agreement is good for you. With time you will probably update it, and it will reflect some of the difficulties or issues or other concerns that brands have or you have, but it will evolve with time. But have one ready to go. So I have to say, some social media influencers include that template, that contract already with their brand proposal. I prefer not to do that because it, to me, it would feel a little bit more like a used car dealerships type of a deal. But at the same time, a lot of times it's an impulse buy. I've had brands that agreed on a deal with me, and by the time we got to the contract, they kind of withdrew. In my case, I always thought that, hey, listen, if they change their minds so quickly, I don't think they probably not the right partner for me anyway. I don't want to push anybody or make them get the sponsorship as an impulse buy. I want this to be a solution that's so beneficial to them that they would sign it today, tomorrow, a week from now. So I separate those two, but just so you know, this is one of the strategies. So have one ready to go. And also, and most brands will already have it, but use online signing services. A lot of people don't have fax machines. I actually don't. And scanning and faxing and PDFing stuff, it does take a while, and it does slow the process. So if the brand already has a service, that's great. But if they don't, and you have some budget for it, there is monthly fees, and I believe in some cases fees per each signing. I would use DocuSign, even though there are other solutions, but this one is pretty much the most popular one. And that way you can have this contract signed without having any type of actual paperwork, and they're absolutely binding in court, so you don't have to worry about it at this point. Now, but how do you put together that contract? Now, again, I'm not an attorney, and I'm sure you're not, but you can put it together yourself, especially a template, and at least the most of it, and then have an attorney to take a look at it. And a lot of times it's just a matter of Googling. You can, Google sample legal agreement, or something specific for your industry. And there will be sites that will offer some free templates. There will be sites that will offer some paid templates, but in some of these cases, paying $50, $100 for a contract that's like 80 or 90% there may be worth it, because don't forget, you'll be using them over and over and over again. So if you have a budget, I would strongly recommend, because it does take some time to put it together. A lot of times you'll find that all of these samples, one will have a part that you need here, and another one will have a couple of parts that you need here. Sometimes you'll combine them. It is not my favorite, I have to say. That's not my favorite way of spending my time, is putting together these contracts. But a lot of times you need to do most of the work up front with that first one, and then it's just a matter of maintenance. Now, after you put that together, I would still strongly recommend to invest some money in consulting an attorney to take a look at it, make some changes, so you're kind of ready to go with your template. And there are a couple of ways how you can do it. Of course, you can hire an attorney that you'll find, I wanted to say in Yellow Pages, but whatever, Yelp. But there are other better ways how I would suggest. One of them is Legal Shield. This is a service I've been using for like 10 years, and I can't imagine my life without it. You pay about like $20 a month. I don't know what the rate is right now, and you get about 20 or 25 free half-an-hour sessions with almost any type of an attorney, and they would also review a contract. A lot of times it is only half an hour, and even if you meet more time, they will give you like some percentage off. So this is definitely a great way to go. And sometimes when you're negotiating a contract and you just want one or two parts of the contract to be reviewed, this is another way of getting it done for free. Now, of course, there is LegalZoom. That's a combination of online resources and attorneys that work with you online. This is where you can buy sample contracts. but you can also have an attorney take a look at it as well. So that's another solution. And of course, there are quite a few others, but these are the ones that I strongly recommend, especially if you're on a budget. So put the meat and potatoes, as you would say, into the original contract by yourself, and then have attorney go over it and make changes to that. Now, by the time you start, you send that contract, if they don't already have one, it will get to their big brand lawyers, and this is where a lot of frustration might start. Not always. Sometimes they don't involve attorneys at all, especially if it's a smaller brand or if it's a smaller deal. They just don't want to waste their time or money on that. But if it's a bigger deal, then yes, the attorneys will get in. They will take their sweet time. It might take days and sometimes weeks to go from one version to another. They're usually brutal, and they're not the people who are looking like they're not the PR people, marketing people that you work with and you're friends with. Their only job is to protect their brand, and they do not want to worry about you at all. So a lot of times they'll make changes that in some cases might even offend you, and some cases will go against what your actual verbal agreements are. But don't take it personally. This is what brand attorneys do. They turn around, and then you just have to review it. And again, if you don't feel comfortable reviewing their changes, make sure you have an attorney who can do that. And I just give you some references for that. Make sure that you go back and forth in Microsoft Word format or any other format where you can have it in the mode of it's called Redline. This is where all the changes that are being made are you can see where they've been something has been retracted and something was added. You can also put notes on the side where you can say, well, this is why I've added this, or oh, well, here's my question, why did you add or remove this? So it's kind of a conversation, negotiation going on the side of the document, but then you can see all of the latest changes. So I strongly recommend you do that. But just like I said, don't get too frustrated. These lawyers, these corporate lawyers, it will be a process, and you just need to kind of stick together and be patient with them. But at the same time, don't give up too much. And we'll talk about the things that you need to have in every contract, at least what I recommend, just in a few minutes. So let's get to it. What are the things that you need to include in the contract? Now, of course, I'm going to once again mention that a lot of these contracts are very specific to your deal and to your industry. So this is why you need to make sure that you are a businessman or businesswoman. So obviously think about this, think about your needs. A lot of times you want to think about what are the how can things go wrong, right? How are the things that you want to protect yourself, but at the same time make sure to cover every single situation you can. With time, as the time goes by, as you sign these deals, as you start working through these deals, you realize what those things are, especially if they're specific to you or those brands or your industry. So you will be learning as you go along. You will be putting it together. Of course, if you know other social media influencers in general or specifically in your industry, approach them and say, hey, do you mind sharing your brand agreement with me, or have you included this, or what should I include? So consult with them. I've done that myself as well. I've seen some other contracts from other social media influencers, and I've taken their pieces and incorporated it into mine. So don't be afraid to do that. This is why it's important to go to conferences like VidCon and VidSummit and Social Media Marketing World. This is where you meet other social media influencers, and they will help you out with this. And there are also workshops and groups for that as well. So what should you include in general in pretty much every brand contract? Well, first of all, and this is in my case because it's very important for me. I'm a journalist. I do news. Make sure that your opinion stays independent from the brand. Make sure they cannot tell you what to do unless you want them to, but then your video may not be, or your sponsorship may not be genuine, and a lot of times that's a recipe for disaster if you're a social media influencer, because it's all about being honest. It's all about being transparent. So you want to make sure that they do not buy you. They do not buy your opinion. Yes, they can buy space, and whether it's on a podcast or space in your blog or YouTube channel, they can send their message, kind of almost advertising there, and put their logos and whatever, but you should not let them buy your opinion. So there should be a clause there that says that the brand does not control whatever else you talk about. Even if you talk about them in other videos, sometimes brand will say, okay, we'll give you the money to make this one video, but you can never talk badly about us ever again. And you don't want that, because you're essentially becoming a sellout and not being an honest person. So I strongly recommend to have that. Now, when you're making these deals, you're essentially providing service and really a product to them, and you really need to outline what is accepting your product and service really is. On their part, it's very easy. They just pay you, right? But on your part, it's not that easy, because how many times can they ask you to re-edit or add or subtract something? You don't want to be stuck in a consistent cycle of redoing and redoing what they say. So you might want to put in your contract how many times they can ask for a update. How many? What are the deadlines? And also, if you're relying on their materials, make sure that they deliver to you on time. I've had this happen to me where I'm supposed to deliver something to them to pay me money, but they didn't deliver their information to me. So you might want to put it in right there in the contract saying, like, if you don't deliver on time and I don't deliver at all, or I deliver partially, I still get paid, because it's not my fault that you didn't get that information to me. So there are many ways how you really can get in trouble if you don't outline what does it mean accepting your work, accepting your service to them that they're paying for. Again, I hate to say this, but you will learn your lessons after the first and second time. But just don't get caught kind of promising and so much and spending so much time where it just becomes not worth it to you. So make sure to set some guidelines. And again, talking to other YouTubers and other social media influencers about it is not a bad idea, because that's how you can get experience from others and learn on other mistakes of other social media influencers. Payments and delivery schedule. One thing that you need to worry about is that they pay you on time, and at the same time, it probably will be tied into the delivery schedule. So you have to deliver by a certain date, but after that, you would send them an invoice. A lot of times, that's what they want, and they have to pay you by a certain time. Now, it depends on what kind of brand you work with. A lot of times, it's a bigger brand. It might take them a while to pay you. So be prepared for that. You can, of course, put some late fees on that, but it's if you're really concerned with a brand that's not paying you on time, and they just like wouldn't stop, and I've had that problem before. A lot of times what I do is I say, listen, here are my rates, and they're not the greatest deal, but if you pay on time, I will give you a 20% discount, right? So essentially you're telling them, hey, if you don't pay me on time, you're just going to pay 20% more. That's something that's also acceptable, but just make sure that the whole payment schedule, amounts, when they get to pay you, how they get to pay you. You don't want to accept a $100 payment as a wire transfer that it costs you $35 to do that, right? So just think about all of those little things. Make sure that everything's taken care of. But definitely, that's something that you want to make sure that any type of non-payments or late payments or refusal of payments is all covered in your agreement. That also brings me to cancellation fees and terms. If they want to cancel a deal for no reason, without you doing something wrong and breaking the agreement, well, you want to set terms there as well. You don't want a brand to be able to just withdraw from the deal overnight. You want to say, listen, you're a big sponsor, or you're taking so many spots. I need 60 days to refill those spots. So if you want to cancel, you have to give me a 60-day notice. Now, the same thing goes for you, of course. If you have a bigger sponsor, they'll pay you more money, but they want the spots of the smaller sponsors, and you want to cancel or get out of that deal. Well, then you would have to give them 60 days as well, unless you renegotiated where they have a longer period of time to wait until cancellation than you. But it's not very likely to be accepted. So make sure that you treat this almost like a prenuptial agreement, in terms of like, what happens if we want to break up, and because that's where things sometimes get not so nice and you want to cover all grounds, just like I said, this agreement should be treated as kind of a gentleman's agreement between friends where things just like put on paper so you don't forget what you agreed on. But this is definitely something you want to make sure that's taken care of. Or sometimes, if somebody wants to cancel right away, then make sure that there's a cancellation fee. I would also put somewhere in there that, what happens if you lose your website, somebody hacks your website, or your YouTube channel gets canceled for some reason. You don't want to owe a bunch of money to the sponsors because you cancel early. You want to put it as an exception, saying if you're incapable of producing it, like something happens to you or something happens to your social media project, you're not responsible for that. And of course, you want to outline what those exceptions are. Being sick, being away. You want to take vacations. Sometimes you're sick. Sometimes someone in your family is sick. Your kid's sick, and you need to take a few days or sometimes a week or two off. You want to make sure you're not being punished and you're not breaking the entire brand deal. You want to put it somewhere in the agreement saying like, listen, if I'm sick and I'm the only person running this channel, or I have a family emergency or death in the family, then what I suggest is just kind of pause the agreement and move everything. Let's say I need 2 weeks to take care of my health or some sort of personal problem. We take those 2 weeks and move all the dates 2 weeks ahead. And that usually is pretty fair, and brands are not going to say, no, we don't care. If somebody dies, you work through it. Most brands will be understanding and accommodating. So that's perfectly fine. But make sure that it's in the agreement. Now, here's an important one. Who owns the content? Unless you're producing the content for their social media, and a lot of times it is part of a brand deal, you want to make sure that you own all of the content and you own it for a while. I just negotiated a brand deal where a brand wanted to put a deadline on giving me rights to their logo, and I said, well, that means that all of this videos that I'm making with your brand's logo, I would have to take them all out of YouTube because they're there forever, and you're only giving me those rights to a certain date. I'm not going to do that, and it's not in your best interest anyway. Why would you want to yank all of this content with advertising your brand at some point? So what you normally propose in that case is that the videos produced before a certain date would all have that right, but they can still be out there for as long as you want. And of course, there could be stipulations about like, okay, after a certain date, you can republish them or create new content with them and so forth. But make sure that you own the content that you create for your own social media, and at the very least have the rights to the content that you make for them so you can use it on your social media. Though sometimes the brand says, no, I'm sorry, you're just basically nothing but a TV production studio for us in this part of the contract, and no, you cannot republish or publish that content in the first place. We want to own it 100%, which again is okay. If it's okay with you, just make sure that it's all there. But content ownership is a big deal. Now, last but not least, make sure that when you have commitments of attending events or going somewhere and working with the brands or going to a certain shoot location, that they cover the travel expenses, or they being split, or at least you talk about who takes care of financial part of all of the logistics. Travel is expensive. You don't want to spend $2,000 traveling and staying in the hotels and paying for Uber to make a video that will pay you $3,000 or $4,000, right? So you want to make sure that the brand is responsible for travel. That's pretty industry standard, but sometimes they split it with you. So of course it depends on how much money you're actually making on it. And when I say travel, I also think of all the other logistical expenses that might come your way. For example, if they want a photo shoot, like I had another day, a brand wanted me to create an interview with a group of people, with a group of their employees. And I have a handheld mic and I have a couple of clip-on mics, but I realized for that photo shoot, I would have to buy a boom mic. Well, that's an expense. That's an extra $200-300. So I put it in a contract saying, hey, listen, I will I will have to invest $300 in this. Of course, I'll continue using this boom mic for the future projects, but I would need $150. I would need you to share this with me because you won this, and they can say no. They can say, listen, that's your problem. Okay, that's your equipment. If you don't have it, then you need to buy it, and you're gonna own it anyway. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we really want to do this project for you, and we'll cover some equipment because we know that in the future you will probably be using it to promote us and to work with us. So we're okay with that. So make sure to talk about and put in the contract the part about who covers the travel expenses and other logistical expenses that do cost money in order for you to work with a brand, in order for you to produce the content that you're producing. So now, I don't want to say that this is a complete list. This is the list that I, over the last 3 years, have figured out is very important. This is where things go wrong. This is where you want to make sure they're all in those contracts. Now, of course, I'm not talking about the non-disclosure agreements or parts about identity, the parts about the copyright, like all of that stuff is usually standard. Which jurisdiction this goes to, if this case goes to court, like all of that stuff is just part of regular agreement. So I didn't include it in here. This is specific for a social media influencer contract. So make sure to have them. Make sure to think of anything else that you need or anything else that might go wrong. Again, ask other social media influencers, but have those in there. And this is not just to have them there. Really think about it, because again, don't think about it as a contract, as something that you're going to use in court. Believe me, nobody ever wants to go to court, and even if you're right, you don't want to go to court. Just think of this as an agreement with the brand, so you all know what you're working off of. So don't forget to have an attorney take a look at it. Of course, at the end of the day, it's important, but this is it. Once you get this contract negotiated, after that, it's just a matter of signing and off you go. It's the end of this process, but it's a beginning of a whole different process, which is working with a brand. And that has its own challenges, but at least you're getting paid. At least you have an experience working with a brand. A lot of times, once you sign up with one brand, a lot of other brands come your way as well, because they can see that, hey, someone's already working with them. We want in as well. But yeah, this is a very exciting, frustrating, but amazing process. It ends with a contract, and it's definitely something that everybody who wants to work with brands, as you should in many cases, needs to know and accomplish. So make sure your contract is as perfect as it gets. Good luck negotiating it, and of course that amazing feeling of actually signing it. You have to experience, and I wish you the best of luck with it. And of course, if you have a chance, let me know how it felt signing that very first brand partnership agreement.